Good evening to all of you. Welcome to another episode of Sri Lanka's first LinkedIn Live talk show. And it's the episode 28. I've been running this for last 28 weeks and I've been bringing many experts to the show. Today we have a very special topic. But before we talk about the topic, let me talk about myself. My name is Amita Gamage. I'm a CEO coach. I'm a personal branding expert. I'm also helping organizations achieve B2B sales goals by working with their teams. Apart from that, I'm a LinkedIn marketer. And today I have another news for you. Last week I announced that I got this new feature from LinkedIn where your background picture changes into your live show while you are live streaming. Right now it's happening. So you can see myself over here. And officially I became a LinkedIn creator. What does LinkedIn creator mode would do? LinkedIn creators are members who regularly share content with their professional community to demonstrate their expertise, ignite conversations about ideas and experiences, and build communities around common interests. So what happens is when you are being enabled as a creator, when the creator mode is on, your connect button will convert into a follow button so that you can connect with your network faster, and then your visibility will be more. And most commonly used hashtags with regard to your profession. Now, in my case, my most commonly used hashtags are coaching, mentoring, personal branding, thought leadership, and young entrepreneurship. Now, those hashtags are added to your profile so the world, your network, would know better about what you create, what you talk about very specifically. So, with that, let me talk about today's topic. Today's topic is about how to become a lifelong learner. Now, who can talk about lifelong learning? Of course, someone who is a lifelong learner can talk about lifelong learning. So I brought the most ideal person to the show. Let me introduce Dr. Lasit Gunawardena to our show. Good evening, Dr. Gunawardena.
Good evening, Amita. It's thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be on your show today, and also congratulations on the getting the link prior status on LinkedIn. That's great.
Yeah, the creator mode. Yes. So we are going to talk about how to become a lifelong learner. And in order to do that, I think it's fair by me to ask you a few questions first about yourself, because your journey alone is a story of a lifelong learner as far as I'm concerned. I believe it. And then, so let's get into the questions and we'll say hi to a few people. We have Akash Kannangara who says hi. And then we have Ranuga. Hi, Ranuga. And we have Callum. And Callum says, congratulations. Okay, Callum, thank you very much. Thank you very much for always coming and seeing us during our live show. So, Doctor, let us know something about your childhood. How did you start? A little bit about your school days. And were you been learning, even during your childhood? Now, I have to always give an instruction to my son. By the time I come in the evening, I would be happy if you could complete these tasks in order to make them learn. So, how about your life, your early childhood?
So if I rewind back, Amita, to the 80s when I was a child, when I started schooling.
Okay.
So I would say that as an only child, I was quite at home. I was
Okay.
obviously under the attention and love and care of my parents. And from the early days, I would say that the environment at home was quite filled with technology gadgets, because my father, being a professional broadcasting engineer, was quite involved. So I used to get to see a lot of gadgets, and I am quite inquisitive at times. And related to this, since he was a pioneer in broadcasting, I had the opportunity when he was the first engineer at ITN. ITN's first TV program back in around 1980. I had the opportunity to be involved as the one of the first, let's say, in the first children's program on ITN, and a couple of years later back into Rupavahini. So my childhood was filled with exposure to technology in different aspects, broadcasting for one. But um, one of the things that I learned at an early age. So my parents were quite supportive of, or wanted supported me with in my, uh, I would say, or trained me in a way that I was quite fond of reading books. So one of the things that I mean, I had a library at home, which basically my parents would, when I was small, would to start things off, to read with me, and then you catch on to obviously read, and you take a passion out of it. So when I move a little further away, like at school, um, I I explored knowledge in terms of participating in quiz competitions. So that was actually, like, apart from studying for subjects, quizzing was the passion that I had, especially when I maybe it was a teenager. I that was more than studying subjects. To be honest, it was quizzing that really kept kept interest me. So I apart from just reading books and finding out information. Remember, this is, I mean, at that stage we didn't have the internet. So when
No
you
internet era. Yes.
so you access to information was not as it
Easy
was a
as today.
luxury. I mean, obviously,
Yes.
and one of the things that I benefited was, as a child, I at home. For example, I was brought up in I used to speak with my father in English and my mother in Sinhala. I mean, although
Okay.
I mean, Sinhala was the mother tongue for us. So, I had naturally, English was more conversant language which I was following to read, and in quizzes that actually helped me a lot to start with. And what I found is, now at that age, just quiz competitions was, like, it was to a certain extent like a hobby. But then I ended up with a passion. I participated representing my school, which was Royal College. I captained my school, and then I went on to represent the country. So I would say, as a passion, starting from reading and learning things, I went up to a extent where I could, looking back, I would be proud of my achievements.
Okay. Right. So the quizzes were around general knowledge or very
Yes, it was.
specific one?
So many, like, it's on any particular, not a specific topic. So it could be geography, it could be history, it could be science, it could be sports, it could be literature, it could be anything. But now at that age, of course, you don't have a specific. I mean, that was the nature of quizzes. So you need to be armed with knowledge which is broad enough so that you can compete. So, but of course, once you move on to higher in terms of schooling, like when I selected mathematics for my A level, and from then onwards, while
Things change.
yes, things change. So I wouldn't call myself a quizzer nowadays. I would say I'm retired from it.
I could remember, I could resonate. I mean, I used to be, I used to enjoy going for these competitions, and I was in the school team. And I can remember, coming from Badulla district, I was schooling at that time, Vialua Central College, and I beat a team from Badulla Central College, and where my cousins were educating, I can remember writing them a letter demonstrating how it went. But
Oh,
today it's completely different. Yes. So my second question, since you also talked about A levels, how did you perform at A levels?
so while quizzing and other extracurricular or co-curricular activities was something which drove me, I would say up to my O levels, I was obviously inclined towards more technical subjects. Like for example, mathematics and science was some subjects that I preferred. But then I wouldn't call myself an outstanding performer at the A levels. So I wasn't the subject matter or how it was taught probably wasn't really maybe I wouldn't say that I was grasp I followed it, but I wasn't really as interested as much as like quizzing. So and if you look at my A levels where I did for my mathematics subjects, I would say that I like once you sat for the A level exam, I was in two minds. Okay, I wasn't really bad as to select. I mean, I wouldn't fail the exam, but then I would know I was really a high flyer who would get straight A's. So I knew I had a chance to get into university, but I wasn't quite sure what possibilities I might come across. So I until the results came, I was a bit of in a uncertainty, I would say.
Okay. So, this era, a few days back, the A level results were released, and then you are an educator, you are a university lecturer, you are a lifelong learner, and then I'm sure there are a lot of parents who are watching this apart from their children. So, I would like to ask for an advice. What kind of advice would you give students, very specifically students who received their A level results few days back?
Yes, I think so. If when we talk about this, Amita, I think if you try to categorize the type, I mean, type of results that one would get.
Yeah,
So one category is that you could be in a category where you studied well, you got what you planned for, and
wanted.
then you are selected to university. That's one category. So if
Yeah,
that's the case, and if you are really a high flyer, like you got straight A's, or based on your rank, for example, that you've been selected to where you really wanted to wish to, then obviously there is it would be smooth sailing to you to a certain extent. Of course, there's a bit of a time where you need to prepare and maybe get ready for that, but then you are more or less certain about where you are heading.
yeah,
If you look at other options, other categories or the other types of results that your one may get, there may be others who were expecting good results. In other words, okay, I want to go to medicine, or I want to go and do to be an engineer. But then your results, once you get it, sounds as if you might not maybe reach that. You might have
I,
passed, but then
yeah,
you might have been your results are not at that level. So in which case you have several options at hand, I will say. So maybe you might think, okay, I didn't really study this time so much. So, but if I did study, I'm sure I could have got better. So you could
yeah,
say, let me try again once again. That there could be
yeah,
some who might think that way. There could be others who said, I've already spent 2 years on this, so I really don't want to spend another year studying the same thing. I need to think
yeah.
of some other. So if for example I was in my case, when I was sat for my exams, I was someone who didn't want to sit for the exam again. In other words, I was pretty sure I'm not going to do my A levels again.
Okay,
So that's in my case. So there might be those. So if you there's for some of you, you if you really are determined to get into university, and you can make it up, then you could revisit, look at your mistakes, or let's say where you might have not scored much, and go back. But then there are others you could select. Okay, I couldn't get into where I wanted. Maybe but I could still go for something else. For example, let's say in the management or commerce stream, many people desire to be the top marks are usually for accounting programs. For example,
yeah,
accounting related degrees. But then So let's say you wanted to be an accountant, so you did with that aim to be selected to that program. But then if you might think of a different option, or you might think, okay, well, I couldn't get into accounting, but I could go to marketing or commerce or business administration. Likewise, then there is others who might actually do A levels, but then they have already have a plan in, or rather a backup plan with in hand. In other words, you might have done your A levels because it's part of your formal tertiary, like second education, but then you already had a plan to do some other program, maybe a vocational study. It could be a maybe another degree. But then there are some others, I'm sure, uh, who expected to pass but who didn't get results as they expected. So maybe parents, I'm sure, if your child is someone who you expected to pass well and get into university and hasn't done well for some reason, I think this is a place where this is a time where you should support them to take decisions like whether you're going to resit for the exam, whether you think so. Maybe you can get some mentoring, like with a teacher who taught the student to help them decide whether you want to do the A levels again, or whether you want to think of another option with some other study. Because remember, you don't really need to get a degree to have a I mean, that's not, it's not a pill for success. There are enough other opportunities. There are enough other examples of people who have been successful. If you look at Bill Gates, of course, a good example, he did get into university, but then he didn't continue. Right? But who is he now? The rest is history.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, this will be very helpful to those uh, students who have just got their results and parents who are confused as to what to tell their kids. You know, encourage them, discourage them, scold them, whatever. So
So
I think,
just add, Amita. So end of the day, if like there are many other options, rather than, I mean, if you get a chance to do a degree, that's fine. But there are many other options where you can not, you don't need to go back to sit the A levels. But there are some where you have found some programs where if you go to a private establishment, you can have a foundation program, for example, and then get into a degree. So you don't
yeah,
need to sort of resit for the A levels, for example.
yeah. So my elder son, who just completed his O-level results, is waiting for his A-level. I have already put him into a digital marketing course, a 3 months one, and also into a online internship program, virtual internship program. He's just completed his O-level because I just want him to get that exposure, nothing else. And once when he has results, he will have a different view about the life and the world ahead of him. So I
Yes,
think we
yes.
have a big
So,
part to play.
yeah, and one of the things that's important is, now, like you said, so after O levels or after A levels, rather than after an exam, I'm sure the student is maybe a little
Relax.
tired, but you need to relax a little bit, maybe breather. But then after that, you have to utilize your time in an efficient manner. So it's
Yeah.
great that you're advising your son that way.
Okay. So let's say hi to a few other people. Hi, Tirina. Thank you very much for joining. Suranga, thank you very much for joining. We have Sampath who says congratulations. Sampath, thank you. And Bianca also has joined us. If you have questions on how to become a lifelong learner, you are free to throw them at Dr. Gunawardhan. Let me go to the next question. Uh, how was your university life? You couldn't come there
So
yet.
yes, so I actually just paused at my A level. So after when I got my A level results, I wasn't quite sure whether I might be selected. In that I was probably, um, as I said earlier. So, but end of the day, when I applied, I did get a chance where to University of Srija, where I'm actually right now working. But I was in two minds as to whether I should really uh, pursue the degree, or whether I should follow some other program. But I nevertheless went ahead. And one of the reasons, Amita, is that personally, in my case, I mean, I at that time, I had studied mathematics related subjects, for example, sometimes. So I was really feeling that I don't need to get involved in another heavy mathematics program. But
Okay.
fortunately, one of the subjects that out of the three subjects that I followed, was a subject called management science at the time, at the science faculty. And that subject was a totally new subject for me, being from a mathematics background. And to supplement that, the teachers, the lecturers who were involved in that subject were quite inspirational, and they actually acted as a catalyst, I would say, for my life, to change my outlook towards the degree. In other words,
Okay. Okay.
I went to I entered the university as a student who was uh, say average to perform, I would say. But uh, due to the content of the subject and how it was delivered, how the lecturers interacted with me, it brought the best out of me, I would say. So by the end of the degree I did, so as I progressed year by year, I improved my performance. First year I was just an average student. But then by the second year, I did well, reasonably well. So I improved. Likewise, at the end of the final exam of the final year, I was pretty certain that I had done well enough to get a first class degree, which is the highest tier in terms of degree recognition. So, in other words, I estimated my performance, and by the end of the study program, I knew that I had done well enough to get enough to the level of first class degree. So I transformed myself with the help of the staff
Lecturers.
members, and also the subject content it created interest in me. So I transformed from being an average student into the top of the batch.
Okay. Interesting story. Someone who was average was able to go to the top level. I'm sure there would have been some kind of effort, methodology applied. But just want to ask you this: how did you study? And do you think that everybody studies the same way? Are there
Yeah,
various ways to study? What is your experience, and what advice would you want to give to these learners about how to learn, how to study?
yes, I mean, so if you look back uh, at a time when we are schooling, so usually our schooling system is such that you have a teacher teaching you subjects. If you think of the traditional scenario, not the online teaching that's happening right now. So
Now,
in
yeah,
school, we are used to having a teacher teach a subject directly, and then maybe homework is there,
yeah,
some assignment, then you submit them and so on. So I was used to studying where maybe at night, for example, I used to sort of study later until late night, and I tend to at the time I didn't have a particular formula to study. But when I think of my university time, one of the major differences is that at the university I didn't study alone. Now, in
oh
a
yeah,
sense, like so at when you are think of schooling, you go maybe for tuition where you study with a teacher, but you don't actually really engage with other students. There's not much room, I would say. But at university, I enjoyed studying with my peers,
group
and
learning.
group learning. And at that point, that allowed deliberations, so discussions where we didn't agree, so we had to sometimes see what's the correct answer, or is this the correct way. And at times there were situations where one of the members would act as a teacher or a tutor, in which explaining to others. Now, I was also
True.
part of some of those activities, and that actually helped me brush up on my knowledge because I was
They
trying to help.
say, yeah, they say teaching is the best way to learn.
Exactly, exactly. So,
Okay.
so one of the things that I figured out then is that as a learner myself, I was learning um, more by listening to others, by
Okay.
and also having discussions. Now, if you think of the traditional classroom or a tuition class, for example, if I go back, I remember there were tuition classes where the teacher or lecturer was talking, and I would be sleeping. It's right after maybe lunch, so you would be sleep. You fall asleep. But then, so it might happen to anyone.
Yeah.
But if I was in a discussion, you wouldn't really fall asleep. So if you look at as a lecturer, what I by studying later about learners, what you find out is that in a classroom, not everyone is the same in terms of their learning. In other words, there are learning styles. Different students or different learners learn differently. Some,
Differently.
yes, some of them prefer to learn visually. In other words, by looking at information or content or the teaching. There are others who might learn by listening. For example, you record a lecture and then replay that several times, or maybe you listen to a podcast and learn from
Yeah.
that. There could be others who are prefer to read content from a textbook and learn, and then there are some others who might prefer to write down. Actually, when I reflect back at my university career or study, I was someone who, at home, for example, I would not be reading content. I was more comfortable writing like notes, short notes. I might not read it again, but I would be writing it down. And when I write it down, it gets
Recalls.
hardwired.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay. So there are what you say is different people or individuals will have individual ways of learning.
definitely. Yes. So in a classroom, not everyone. So even though, like maybe as a teacher, so as a teacher, what I would do is I would try to include different types of media in a classroom environment, and also in today's context when we have this distance learning, for example, where not distance, rather remote learning, where um, we don't really get the opportunity to meet with a student at one point. I would have content which has text based, audio or voice based, and then some animations likewise, so that different categories of learners are provided with an opportunity or a fair chance to learn.
Yeah. So for students or for learners, anyone, you don't have to. I mean, you can call a student. Even I myself is a student. If I'm at a class, I don't have to feel bad just because my learning method is different.
Yes. So actually, the onus or the important thing is, as a teacher, the a teacher must be sensitive to that. As from the student's point of view, you have to figure out what you are, what way you better learn. So, in other words, maybe even though your teacher would teach you in one way, maybe if you can record it and replay that, or if you try to find some other additional information related to that, which is visual in nature, that might help you learn better.
Yeah. So thank you very much. I think I'm sure it will help all kinds of learners to identify your type of learning, the way you would absorb whatever you are learning. So my next question is, Doctor, how did you get into IT?
So, going back to my time at school, now when you rewind back to the 80s, obviously uh, it is an era where computers are a bit of a rarity. But I was privileged, or I was had the opportunity to receive a computer as a present for my 13th birthday. So that's where really it all started up, where my interest from different technology or gadgets moved on to much more focused area in computing. But if you think of the time when I studied my university career, or entered university back in the mid 90s. At that time, computing degrees were quite limited in Sri Lanka, and we also didn't have any private educational like degrees in Sri Lanka. So, parallel to the time that I was studying for a physical science degree, I enrolled in this British Computer Society examination. It's a professional exam or higher educational qualification, where it provided me the opportunity to learn or earn a degree equivalent in computing. So by the time I graduated, um, I had a degree in physical sciences, plus I had the BCS higher educational qualifications. So it's like it complemented my skill set, I would say.
Okay. So, do you advocate someone who is in a university or who is doing one to also follow something else?
Yes, I there are, of course, it depends on the real how you manage time and how you your attitude to us. Well, if you look back at the time when I did my studies, we had limited opportunities to do another degree, and there was obviously preferred degree that you wanted. So, but there were options to where, for example, apart from BCS at the time, CIM, CIMA was a more uh, favorite choice for many because it complemented a degree. Now, if you look at today's situation, if you look at today's students, I would say that there is an opportunity for someone to do two degrees, provided you can manage time. Now, unlike the time when I studied, right now I would say it's people have other technologies, I mean, let's say social media, for example, which to a certain extent have some distractions on studies sometimes, and as a result maybe you might not be able to devote quality time, because remember, once you invest time to start something, uh, it's it's always good to have the motivation to complete it rather than drop it at the middle. So it's good to have complementary certificates, not the same, but in some way provide you an edge. For example, you could be doing a computing related certification and then something on management or some marketing
Yeah,
in that to
true.
complement.
Yeah. So there are, I mean, as you very correctly said, today kids do have so many options. I mean, I can remember how dumb I was when I finished my O-level exam. But then my son is learning digital marketing after O-level. That
Indeed.
shows, the transformation and the time that we are living in. Yeah.
So yes, so
So
the opportunities we had at the time and the time that our kids would having is
yeah,
quite different.
yeah. So eventually now you completed your degree, you became a graduate, and then what happened?
So I, of course, by the time I completed my studies, as I said, I knew what sort of result I was getting, and based on my performance up until then, I got an opportunity to join the university as a instructor in computer technology. So I had the opportunity to join before I got my results really, and that back in 1999 actually, that opportunity was starting point in a career at the same university. So I moved on from an instructing position into a lecturing full-time lecturing position, and moved on from there. So it's been 22 years now in academia.
Okay, that's quite a time, 22 years. So I would also like to ask you this question for the benefit of today's kids or even adults for that matter. We are talking about lifelong learning, especially someone who has passed many generations. I mean, you have passed the quiet era where we didn't have social media or anything like that. But now you also have entered, you are someone in IT, so you are also social media savvy, I guess. So, how do you focus or how do you stay away from distractions? Now, these distractions do not have to be digital all the time, but then in order to achieve something, you have to focus, concentrate. I'm sure we can always advise, we can go to internet and find quotes about what people have told about all this, but then how do you do it? How do you stay away from distractions?
Yes, so I think I fully agree with you. I mean, compared with era back, today, whether it's for a teenager or someone just starting their careers or a university student, even for us, the same. I mean, distractions are all around us. So, and
Yes.
like rightful, like you said, there can be technological. I would say basically, maybe more mainly today, the main distraction would be concentrated on your smartphone. So
Yeah.
people, everywhere would just be going in and watching the screen, uh, as if they're walking in the bus, whatever. But if we look back, so we can't disconnect from the devices that we have around, but this can affect our life, any aspect of our life. So if I look back, like my strategies or how I would say to advise is, one is when you are really studying, or when you want to devote some time for a particular task. I think one of the things that you have to find is a slot where you have minimal distractions. So in that, that's, let's say, forget about the phone, as you said. So I would prefer, if I'm really studying something or if I need to focus on something deep, I would pick a time where I have less disturbances, meaning it could be late night or early morning.
So it could be
That's
even something like reading a book. That is also kind of a study.
definitely, definitely. So one is, you have to, if possible, you have to pick a time where you would have minimal distractions. So for example, there might not be any calls. On the other hand, sometimes that might be a luxury that you might not be able to afford. So in which case, what you do is, you have to find or identify. Now, if you're trying to read a book, uh, now you might not be able to read the book in one go, definitely, but then if you manage your uh, time, and if you break it down into manageable portions, for example, read a chapter in an hour. Now that sort of strategy you could adopt, so that you are incrementally moving ahead to your target. So going back to the issue of how to stop distractions,
Yeah.
I would probably look at a situation where I try to disconnect from the uh, technological sort of connections that I have. For example, one way I would definitely advise is, unless you really need all these notifications from apps, they are really sort of a time waster, which pops up and gives you sometimes. Okay, what I normally would do is I would uh, disable all social media related notifications, but maybe email I would give an exception. So email notifications fine, but not others. So and another strategy that I usually follow is, I have a I usually follow a uh, zero inbox policy. You could even can Google up this and see. It sometimes criticized as well, but in my inbox I only keep mails which I have to follow up as work. In other words,
Oh,
I don't allow junk mail into my primary work and private emails. I either
okay.
use filters to block them. So when it comes to email, I don't want distractions. I don't want to spend time, even number of if you get, you might think it's just a few seconds that you're spending on a junk mail or a spam mail advertisement that comes up. But if you add up the time you are spending, I think it will. If you adapt the time, it will a be a waste of time. B, the distractions. That's the first. So every time you get attention to check with some email that comes up or a message that comes up, you lose focus, and then to
You have to
come back.
start again. You have to restart
Exactly.
again. Yeah. I
Definitely.
got
So if I was really doing something serious, I would actually go up to the extent of switching off my phone if that really can be done. Where if I need some quality time, maybe if I'm setting a question paper, for example, or let's say if you are studying for an exam, and the exam is tomorrow, right? And where you really don't need that. And let's say there are some students who are good at last minute study,
Studying.
right? They don't study for the whole term, but the last day they study like nothing, right? So there are students. So yeah, you probably want to cut off those distractions.
Yeah.
Also, to add to something, Amita, now in my case, when I was studying, one strategy that I adopted when I was studying at, for example, O levels and A levels, was I listened to soft music in the
Okay.
background. So that was the when I was playing a soft music on the background, that would cut off the other distractions like maybe some voices or vehicles passing around, because I was but it's not loud, just instrumental, I would say. So
Okay.
that's one strategy that I adopted.
Okay. So doesn't matter whether you are a student. Uh, when I say student, a school student or a university student, you could be still student if you are, pursuing your MBA as an adult. Still, you are considered a student. You better stay away from distractions, and then we just found few tips and tricks as to how you could stay away from distractions. So my next question is, now in the case of mine, I consider that I have completed my uh, formal education to very large extent. I might still take up a small course or something, but then if I look back, okay, I'm done. Does it mean that it's the end? Uh, do you have to be in formal education to consider that you are a learner? What's your
When
thoughts
you
on?
Yeah. So if you look back a couple of decades earlier, if you look at how people learned and why they learn, you would say that okay, it's to you learn to get qualified and then to get a suitable job, good job, for example, and that
Most of the
that
time?
process is very further. And once you are once you get into a position, maybe after that your experience counts, and maybe you might have on the job training or something like that, but beyond that you really don't switch into a mode unless you have a promotion where you are expected to get certain efficiency.
Yeah.
But today, uh, I think the situation has dramatically changed. So the model of learning has been disrupted by this idea of lifelong learning.
Okay.
Basically, the idea is that the lifelong learning basically means you are learning for life, not just to learn for the qualification. Where you basically aim to the idea of what lifelong learning, what is in other words a lifelong learning versus a formal learning. You are learning something. Number one, it's voluntary, so it's something that you try to learn on your own accord, not because it's forced by your company. Then it is something that you are motivated to do on your own. In other words, yourself, you start on by yourself and you proceed on your own accord, right? So those are two important aspects of what you consider to be lifelong learning. So I would say, Amit, today you there are with especially with technology, there are a lot of opportunities for anyone at any stage of your career, whether you are a undergraduate, whether you are maybe a employee who just started work, whether you are a manager or whether you are a senior manager. There are opportunities where you can learn basically. I mean, not in a formal manner by going to a university or some other institution, but there are enough opportunities, for example, online, where you can uh, gain valuable life skills. And also, Amit, I have to just maybe get at this point that when we say learning, it not need not always be knowledge. It
Oh,
could be
okay.
skills, and in certain cases, it could even change. We used change your attitude towards a certain topic.
Okay, so it
So
is not also uh, directed towards a certificate or degree also.
not necessarily always. So and also remember that when you think, remember the key word here is this. It is on sort of self-motivated, where you really are doing it because you really want to do it.
Yeah,
On one hand, so there can be different reasons why you selected it, uh, but you don't need to always, um, like, let's say, if you the most issue, one of the big issues that many people have is that we start something but we don't continue to the end.
yes,
So we just, register for something. For example, a good example these days is people register for webinars, right, which are
yes,
around, but then might not actually, turn up on the day. You might not uh, you might not spend enough time. So in life, what we expect in life, a lifelong learner is someone who's motivated and commits to that aim.
yeah. I mean, I myself is sometimes I think is guilty, committing to something and then not completing, especially about maybe completing a book on a specific time period. I believe, okay, I'm going to finish this book by within a week, but then sometimes I might take 1.5 months to complete it because I never committed. Uh, but then you buy. I'm sure I still have one or two books or few books which I have bought because I wanted to read it, but never read it yet. So again, that shows on my side, I have not been so motivated or not being responsible enough to become a lifelong learner. There's areas for improvement, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that I would say, in addition to the, I mean, if you look at the immediate, like, let's say, the past year, one other thing I would try to highlight here is that we've had situations where, in certain sectors, people had, lost jobs opportunities,
Yes.
and um, with that, this idea of lifelong learning has a has an important concept where, basically, let's say, you are looking at large population who needs to get reskilled in some area. And also, if you look at, with the rapid changes in technology, what's happening is, if you look at the current, like, if you look at this World Economic Forum, for example, the opportunities that are, let's say, if you look at what types of jobs
Skills.
will turn up in the next,
Future. Yeah.
say, yeah, what you find is that, uh, now, if you look at the current students out who are schooling, by the time they enter the workforce, the jobs that they might have to get into, or the skills that they might need, are even right now not even found yet. In other
Yeah.
words, the needs will change. So if you look at the top 10 skills, back, what happens in, let's say, um, in 10 years time, or let's say by 2025, 2030. So there'll be a lot of skill, like, there's a need for people who are good in problem solving skills, like active learning skills, like critical thinking. Creativity is a very important thing. So you will have less opportunities for people who can do, let's say, maybe things like data entry, or, for example, uh,
Routine
you know,
type of jobs.
routine kind of things. Yes, definitely. So there'll be a shift in terms of the demand. So obviously, people will need to, in the future, people will need to be continuously adding skills onto themselves.
Yeah, so, doctor, to add something, you are also from IT. I'm sure you
Yes.
must be knowing what kind of jobs that IT will take over. Maybe, I don't know, artificial intelligence or whatever. You want to add a little bit more over there?
Yeah, well, I would say, well, I don't want to put anyone in a particular field to scare anyone, but then the realities are, for example, jobs like, for example, in case of things like the accounting profession, for example, I'm not specifically, but then those are situations where, systems can take over.
Yeah.
And if you look at another area of interest, AI, for example, or things like maybe anyone can Google up deep learning, for example, or deep fakes. Now, right now, we have news readers
Yes.
reading the news,
Yes.
but uh, but I'm sure which it's already happening. But then there'll be a time within the next decade where you don't need news readers.
Doctor,
Uh,
whether the live
yes.
streamers are at risk.
Well, the question could be that you could, uh, I would say, already what's happening is, if you think of, there are situations where on Facebook, for example, there are chatbots, right?
Yes.
And on sites as well. So where basically they carry out a conversation as a real person,
Yeah,
and
instead of a
we are
human being.
able to separate between the two.
Yes. Yeah. And you feel actually you are talking to a real human being. So I know my part-time job as a live streamer is at risk. That much I realize.
Oh, sorry. Actually, well, if you add, well, maybe I was referring to more of the rather than as a live streamer, but I was referring to the maybe
News
audience
readers.
part, the
Yeah.
audience part of it. But yeah, well, it's the main issue here is that I think everyone's interested in creating content, and
Yeah.
today it's because people are consuming content, and that's
Yeah.
where attention goes on. So that to a certain extent can be automated in
Yes.
the future.
True. Yeah. Yeah. So you gave me a lengthy answer for that. I mean, and you also covered one of the questions that I was anyway planning to ask about lifelong learning and the future workplace. And then you very clearly mentioned that some of the jobs will be vanished. Some of the
Yes.
skills are, we are not even thinking about learning those skills, but they will be demanded in a very near future. We are not talking about 25 years ahead, but in next 5, 10 years time.
Yes, I mean, if I add something more now, one of the things that
Please.
I would recommend today for anyone who is interested in reflecting as a lifelong learning, that is, you are trying to show to someone that you are a lifelong learner.
Yeah,
So how can you project yourself? Now, sometimes
exactly.
people like to put in their CV, you are a fast learner, you are a quick thinker, problem solver. So how can you reflect that whether you are a lifelong learner? Now, I would say one way you can easily show that is that if you have followed any online course on a MOOC. I don't know whether anyone knows the idea of MOOC, MOOC, massively open online courses. A good example is Coursera as a platform or edX. I'm sure everyone um, of the audience may have been to these sites. So
Yes.
Coursera and edX, for example, are run by especially higher education institutions. Many of them are in the US and any other top higher education institutions. And what you find on these platforms are content prepared, targeting. Like they aren't really going to provide you a degree. Some of them actually do provide long-term engagement, but they are provided in a way that content is actually shorter, like let's say a few weeks of engagement, right? And it's and you can follow that. Most of the time the content is free for you to learn. You can learn, you can follow, read, understand, you can get the knowledge free. But
Yeah.
if you really want to put it in your CV, look, I did this course from Harvard University, or I did this course from uh, MIT, and I know what they have talked about. If you want to talk like that, you could mention you have to pay and do it. There are of course methods. For example, in Sri Lanka, I can later share this link. There's a program called Skills Online Sri Lanka program. It is run with the help of Commonwealth of Learning. I think the organization in Sri Lanka that runs it is the National Library of Sri Lanka. If you go to their website, which I think will be shared, you can register for Coursera courses and actually follow that. The course actually is free, but to get the certificate also you can follow. I mean, you can follow and get the certificate through this link for a
Okay.
limited time. Because the certificates are usually around $50. So, and in the last past year,
Yeah.
Coursera and edX have provided these for university students for a limited time, free of charge. And if you can put that, if you can follow one, put it in your CV and say, look, I did this course. That will give you the employer an idea. This person has done a course by himself on his own accord and completed it with his own motivation. He's a person we can hire because if we tell him to do something, he can. This is a evidence that he can do it on his own,
So,
and
Dr.
that's the
Gunawandan, let me rephrase it or reiterate it. What you say is, you sometimes have this phrase on your CV which says, I'm a lifelong learner. But then, how do you prove it? What you say is, do a course on your own, and if it is online course, it's even better, isn't it? That's what you say.
yes, on your own accord. Yes.
Yeah. And then have it on your CV, then they know that you are a lifelong learner on your own with your own motivation. You have completed the course.
Yes, definitely.
Oh, that's a very good advice to anyone
Yes.
who is still having this statement on your CV. I'm a lifelong learner. This is how you prove it. Yeah, and this link is very important. Thank you very much for. Sometimes, I mean, I didn't know about this particular course that it's available online. It's available
So
through National
this
Library.
is, Amita, this is particularly for Sri Lankans, and there's a limited opportunity. But beyond this, you can directly go to Coursera and edX and get it on your own as well. But the
Yeah,
advantage here is it's free of charge.
yeah. Thank you very much, Doctor. Now, uh, the we have come to about almost 1 hour. We have about 3 minutes to complete 1 hour. No problem. We can take a little more time. But I would like to ask you this question. Sometimes now, before the last question. Now, this is the pandemic time. We have been experiencing a pandemic era for about a year, and then we thought everything is going to be all right, and suddenly, uh, lockdowns are happening, lane by lane, village by village. What can we do these days, as a lifelong learner?
So again, one thing you could do is you can follow courses like that I mentioned. So now, you must be mindful of how much time you can spend. So one strategy, any of these courses or any of these programs, you would say the amount of time that you need to spend on that. So it's usually in hours. So you have to be frank with how much time you need to spend and try to follow on that. When we talk about at the pandemic, Amita, like so one option is to use those MOOCs and follow a program like that. But at the same time, now people learn about the pandemic or COVID, how to be careful about it. Also, from in a way, it is the process. Sometimes, let's say, if you want to find out, okay, how does it get spread, and you follow a program or say some, you could equate that to a lifelong learning as well. But be mindful that you have to be careful to separate where you collect the facts from.
Ah,
So, one
okay.
of the reasons, yeah, because remember there are many people out there who are getting their degrees right now from WhatsApp, I would say,
Yeah.
because they learn everything from WhatsApp. It's a very convenient method. However, what comes on WhatsApp is not verified. It's just forwarded from someone, and
True.
you have to be very careful in following those what is stated.
Non-verified sources. Yeah.
Yes. So,
Exactly.
as a lifelong learner, you should be intelligent enough to select the sources. Like, for example, I can't say that every online course has accuracy is 100%.
Yeah.
So, if, for example, Coursera and edX, definitely, yeah, but then there are many others where you have to be mindful of, or you have to be careful to see whether the content is um, up to standard.
Yeah. So, Doctor, before I come to the last question, we have few others who are saying hi to us. We have Ravi, who always come here, and then we have Sasidu, and then we have Ranuga, who says, Dr. Lasit Gunawardena, good. I'm sure he must be knowing you, maybe one of your students, probably. And then we also have Aditya saying, hi, all. It's great to see you coming and joining. And then Kapila Katsuri says, show the link again. Yeah, I will definitely show. Sridhar say, thank you very much, Sridhar. Stay. I have the last question to Dr. Gunawardena. Doctor, my last question to you is now, as a lifelong learner, sometimes one might feel, okay, I have learned so much now, I know everything. Okay. I mean, I know almost everything. Kind of a feeling. You want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so I think first of all, as a lifelong learner, you have to be slightly focused in adding whatever the content, or like what you need to learn with some focus. Like, it must have some value to you. For example, let's say if you are if you are studying to become a marketer,
Yeah.
and then right now if you try to think, okay, I want to find out about how they make drug discovery for COVID. I'm sure there are opportunities for you to learn, but then
Yeah.
maybe it doesn't have so much value for your study. In the same way, right now there are, with a lot of information, for example, on COVID. So there are quite a lot of COVID experts out there who have
Tell me about
learned,
it.
yes, who can tell you what is good or what is bad, and uh, one thing you have to be careful, I would say, is having too much confidence of what you know and what you don't, or versus what you don't know. So
Yeah.
I would just at this point take sort of a move on to to illustrate this graphically. I
Yeah.
mean, I wonder whether we can just share the screen.
Yeah. Sure. Please.
So if okay, this is just a simple diagram. I'm using this and I'm linking it to, this is a concept which was introduced by Professor Paul Matt White.
Okay.
So imagine this circle is representing all the information out there which has been discovered, human knowledge right now. Now,
Yeah.
if you, as learners, in our primary education, we have a rounded education because we learn about different fields. I mean, like, let's say about mathematics, about some science or social studies, arts, and so on. We go on to our O levels, which also is to a certain extent similar, rounded, or rather across different disciplines. If
True.
you look at our A levels, we select a particular discipline area, stream, mathematics, science, commerce, arts, etc., technology, etc. If you are doing a degree or some other program like that, you move on to a more specific area
Yes.
depending on the degree title, bachelor's degree I'm referring to. If you go higher, with a master's, you even do it narrower. Now, after a master's, someone might want to know what's happening in this particular field, what's the latest happening, right?
Yeah.
Whether it is computing or whether it's finance or economics or marketing or medicine. So you can read about in research papers to see what's the latest that is happening. And if, for example, anyone out there ever thinks of doing a PhD at some point in time of their life, or a doctorate in general. So a doctorate basically is aimed. The idea is that it would create new knowledge, ideally, and
Yes.
that this boundary. that we refer as the human knowledge will ideally be expanded, right? So it's a slight notch made by the particular person during their let's say doctoral study. Now that's your PhD. That's something new you add, right? So you might think wow, so I know everything now because you studied for so long and you created something new. But this similarly, a lifelong learner might think of a very focused area of study, and then he knows everything. He has read everything on that area, right? But don't forget the bigger picture. There's lots more that you have not touched. So this is a
Wow.
message that as a lifelong learner you have to be open to. In other words, you can uh, you it's a journey as a lifelong learner. You enjoy it on the way, but you can't. There is at no point you can say that you know everything. There's much more to be discovered, and of course you need to be focused. And the idea is that it should be linked to your life journey. So I think that's a good way to end the message to talk about
Amazing, amazing.
how
So
this is going.
stay humble, and continue to be a lifelong learner. That's the message. Yeah. Uh, we have another comment. Let's read that as well. It's from Pramukh. It was a very informative session. Thank you very much, Dr. Lasis Gunawardhan, and I'm so proud to be a student of yours. Also, thank you to Amita for this wonderful session. Pramukh, thank you very much for joining us. And we always, Doctor, before the program, we always give a book courtesy of Pick a Book. And I would recommend that you go to the website www.pickabook.club and check what they do. They encourage people to read books and come and present in uh, one of their forums. And so every week they offer me a book to be offered to someone. Of course, we don't choose winners here, but today it is Kapila Kasturi, who was so eager to get that link, and he requested with a comment, "Can I have the link again?" So that shows how much are some eager to learn. So I decided, okay, this time it is Kapila Kasturi who would get that book. Kapila, please make sure to inbox your mobile number and your home address, so we would courier. There could be little delays sometimes due to today's situation, but you will definitely going to get your book at home. So I would like to thank Dr. Lasit Gunawardana, Senior Lecturer, Department of IT, University of Sri Jayawardena Pura, for coming here and sharing your knowledge, especially not only for university students, but for people like me who are adults who are eager to learn. And you just gave us a lot of knowledge, information, tips, and tricks on how to become a lifelong learner. Thank you very much for. I know you're after work, and then you spend good 1 hour plus with me, with my audience, to help us create value.
Thanks, Amita. Thanks for the invitation. It's been a pleasure to join with you and share my thoughts today.
Yeah. Okay. So, okay, Kapila, please inbox the mobile number as well as your home address. Send it to my LinkedIn inbox. I will pass it to Pick a Book and we'll send you the books. He has already put his mobile number. Thank you very much. So, we'll meet with another great program next week, and please follow the instructions given by the health authorities. Stay safe and good night.